Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, welcome everybody for today's IIA-50 commemorative lecture by Professor Venkatakrishnan. Professor Venkatakrishnan served as the head Udaipur Solar Observatory, USO, for long 16 years until his superannuation in the year 2015. The observatory was built in 1976 by Dr. Arvind Bhatnagar. Since 1981, USO had been managed by the Physical Research Laboratory Ahmedabad for the Department of Space, Government of India. So during his tenure at USO, he created new facilities at the observatory, including a modern 50 centimeter aperture solar telescope with advanced back-end instruments with the help of his enthusiastic colleagues. So USO fills the large longitudinal gap between Australia and Spain and provides a link for continuous solar coverage in international collaborative programs, including the Global Oscillations Network Group, GOM. Now, before joining USO, Professor Venkatakrishnan had spent 25 years at the Indian Institute of Astrophysics, Bangalore, conducting research on solar physics. So he guided several students for their PhD degree at both the institutions, IIA and USO. His new interest is in writing books on the sun for young people. So with great pleasure, on behalf of the organizing committee IIA-50, I welcome Professor Venkatakrishnan to deliver his talk on solar telescopes, description of my association with Kodaikanal and Udaipur. Professor Venkatakrishnan.
Thank you. Thank you, Aruna, for your kind words. And I want to thank the organizers also for giving me this wonderful chance to participate in the 50-year celebration, and of which, um, as you mentioned, I had spent 25 years before moving to Udaipur. Now, I want to dedicate this talk to the memory of the late Dr. R.S. Narayanan, who was in, I will mention more about him in a separate slide, and I'll also explain why I want to dedicate this talk in his memory in that slide. So let us move on. So this is the plan of my talk, and maybe you can read these things. My first encounter with the sun, early days, then switch to theory, switch back to instrumentation, and then I switched to some dome construction work, and then finally migration to Udaipur, where, as Aruna mentioned, MAST was built. And here I want to mention about UR and how he helped us for the construction of this telescope. And finally, I want to give some idea of the lessons which I learned from my own students. So that will be kind of interesting. Okay, so now let me go as per the plan of the talk. See, I joined Kodaikanal in March 1974, and at that time I had no idea at the time of joining that it was the International Quiet Solar Year, so one cannot expect any activity, solar activity during that time. So with great enthusiasm, I was assigned to work at the spectrohelioscope, which is a very ancient device with paddles. And the exciting thing was I could monitor the sun. It is as if we were flying over the sun and seeing various portions of the sun. So that was very exciting. And I was thinking, okay, let's see what happens. And suddenly I could see a solar prominence, eruptive prominence. And that was really a bit of luck, a stroke of luck, because happening in the international quiet solar year. And I was so impressed by that sight that in the night when I went to sleep, I dreamt of a kind of forest fire, and the flames were there jutting out over the hills of Kodaikanal, and they were colored in red color, the same color which I saw the prominence. So it was a peculiar psychological effect of the first encounter with the sun, and I was happy to kind of work on this. Now, all the while I was thinking of improving, because for some reason I felt that one should have some automated viewing of the sun through the spectroscope. So I was getting some, at that time I didn't know, it was very primitive ideas on doing this. So I had a first official meeting with Bappu very soon after I joined. And very, very enthusiastically, I went about describing the ideas I had. And Bappu, with his typical smile, listened to that very carefully and politely. And then he bent down, took out a piece of paper and started writing something, as if, like, doctors do while writing prescription. And he then handed over this paper to me. And I opened it, and then I looked at it. There were some books, names of some books. Then he said, "You read all these books, and then you come back to me with your ideas." Then he said, "However, now you are not, you're stopping your work on the sun. I want you to go to Kavalu." And that was kind of, in those days, the good people, the smart people were chosen to go and work in Kavalu. That was the kind of thing at that time. And so I was feeling, okay, although I had a good encounter with the sun, let me now try and move to the stars. So that's how I moved from Kodaikanal, because the mountains of Kodaikanal were also little giving me a feeling of claustrophobia. I mean, surrounded by all mountains. So I was very happy to leave the place, really, strictly speaking, because uh, one could enjoy the sun and so on, but otherwise, after that, it was very difficult for me in those days when we had limited means and so on. So I was very happy to leave Kodaikanal. So I moved on to Bangalore, and there I had to go to Kavalur, and uh, there the reason I was sent to Kavalur was to relieve Professor Parthasarathi. Apparently, he was working very hard at the 1 meter solar telescope, and 1 meter Zeiss telescope, and apparently he had once slept in the developing room, in the photographic room, and people were anxious when they didn't see him come out, and eventually he came out and so on. So they sent word to Professor Bappu, and Professor Bappu thought he should send somebody to relieve him. But I had a delicate task, because Parthasarathi was not easily, like, you cannot say to him, take rest or something, take a break. That won't do. I was told earlier, it was very difficult to tell him that. So I went to him very politely, told that Professor Bappu has sent me to observe. So he told me that you're supposed to teach me. So he said, okay, I will teach you. And he really taught me the basic things. And when I started observing, I told him, no, now that I'll take care of this, why can't you go and take a nap or something? So very reluctantly, he went, and that worked. The whole idea worked. And so I used to relieve him from time to time, and that was going on. Now, after a while, Professor Bappu thought I should choose some particular topic, and he chose for me the topic of flare stars. And he said, why don't you work with the 15-inch telescope in Kavalu? And this 15-inch telescope was, it was not like the 1 meter. It was a far cry from the 1 meter because you had to move it with hand, and it was quite difficult. I mean, you had to have a lot of strength to move it from one position to another. And there I was working with this telescope, and we had for the detector, we had a strip chart recorder. So it used to record the level, intensity levels of the stars. And this was going on. Then one night, Mr. Sadashivam from the engineering, from the electronics department, he came with a box, it's a photon counter. He said, this is made in-house by me, by myself, and Professor Bappu wants you to test this on stars. The reason was that it was not easy to take time from the 1 meter because they were regular observers and they would not give up their time. So Professor Bappu would have thought this 15-inch telescope is ideal. A, because it is small in aperture, and so photon counting really helps, and so on. I didn't know all this. I was feeling, oh gosh, this guy is disturbing me in my observations. So let me deal with him first. So I put the telescope, pointed it at different bright stars, got all the counts very fast, finished several stars, then handed back the box to him, went back to the chart recorder, and then continued my work. Now, the next day, we went to Professor Bappu's office, and Sadashivam was also there. I found that Professor Bappu, he had a look at those numbers and the star names and so on, and he was furious. He was shouting at Sadashivam that photon counter for such bright stars, what are you thinking of, and so on. Then I piped up. I said, sir, it was my fault because I thought I want to get it over with very fast, and therefore I put it on bright star. So he said, he didn't say anything. He just glared at me, and that's all. Okay, go. And then I then learned that uh, each thing has its own purpose. I think Bappu wanted to uh, start having digital things right from those days, and he wanted to start testing all these photon counters and so on. But I made a mess of it. Okay. Now that was there, and I started learning about flare stars, made some theory, and so on. Then it so happened that I got an attack of paratyphoid, and then that lasted for many few weeks. I think it was unusual, and I lost my strength. Then I felt I could not move I would not be able to move the 15-inch telescope. So I went to Professor Bappu and said, can I take some time off from Kavulu and I can work here in Bangalore with Professor Gokhale? Because we had been discussing MSD and magnetohydrodynamics, and it was one of my favorite subjects even from my college days. So Professor Bappu said, okay, you can do that. So we started the work, and then very quickly we were able to publish a paper in solar physics. I still remember Kocher telling me that you should give sweets to everybody because that is the policy, that is a custom for anybody publishing their first paper, and so on. So, of course, my mother made some sweets, and I distributed it later. Now the thing of this is, we went to Professor Bappu and told about this paper. I told him that I was able to publish a paper. Then he was very happy. Then he said, "Oh, in that case, if you feel that you can do better or you can do well in theory, why don't you continue with Professor Gokhale?" So I didn't realize what's happening. I said, "Okay," uh, and then I said, "Okay," and then went and told Professor Gokhale, "I'm going to work with you," and he was happy, and that's it. But then later on, this that's why I said it's an epilogue. I had gone to visit Mrs. Yamuna Bappu for the sad thing to condole the death of Professor Bappu. And she was recalling that I still remember that day when you said you will work with Gokhale. He came back and he was very sad, disappointed, angry. He said, he was saying, "Well, I can get other young people, let him do what he likes," and so on. So I didn't realize that he would feel it this way. I took his words at face value, but he was such a gentleman. And that time he had not expressed his own desire that if I work with Professor Bappu, but he didn't tell that. He probably would have thought, okay, Gokhale Saab is getting a student, and he was a totally very generous person. But he was also a human being, and that's why I got a glimpse of what happened in that evening. And at that time, I felt sorry. Okay, that was something I didn't realize. Now, now, let me quickly tell about this theoretical work which I did. The original problem suggested by Professor Gokhale uh, didn't turn out well. Of course, I learned a lot about elliptic functions and so on, but then I kind of left it alone. And meantime, see, Siraj and myself were put in a room in the so-called new building at that time, and we started chatting and we started collaborating, not only just chatting. And now we wrote quite a few papers, and we went and told Professor Bappu about this, and he was very happy. And uh, he said, "This is what should happen." And he had just put two similar disciplined fellows together in a room, and he hoped something will come out of it. This was the typical Bappu way of nurturing. I mean, he never forced anything. He used to hope that people get together and start collaborating and working, and he was so happy that it happened. So now, before I describe my experience with Unno, let me tell you what happened when I met him later in the corridor. He was saying, "I'm getting fed up with you loitering around. Why don't you finish your thesis?" Then I had to explain that the original topic didn't work out, and I'm just looking around and so on. He said, "No, no, no. Why don't you? You have published many papers. Why don't you try to combine them into a thesis?" So I agreed, and I had to change that. See, in Bangalore University, we had to give a title in the beginning. So the title was Convection and Magnetic Fields in the Sun, because Professor Gokhale was working on the solar interiors. And so I had to change now the title to Convection and Magnetic Fields on the Sun. So that was difficult. Change of title means it's a lot of procedure. So I took a shortcut. I should not reveal it, but let me tell what I did. I went to the clerk in the Bangalore University who was dealing with this, and I spoke in Kannada. I said, ಸ್ವಲ್ಪ ಒಂದು adjustment change ಮಾಡಬೇಕು. ಇದು ಒಂದು in, the word in, I want to change to on. Small typing the mistake agide ಆ ಟೈಮಲ್ಲಿ. Then he said, ಏನು problem ಇಲ್ಲ sir. Then he was typing some, in those days, they used to use this, what is that thing called? I forget the name. Stencil. So he said, okay. And then he put everything in stencil and made the title officially Convection and Magnetic Fields on the Sun. So I had no problems about that. I know this is a wrong thing to do, but it happened. Anyway, after that, in the meantime, Professor Bappu had gone to Germany. And before going to Germany, he had told me that he had invited Professor Unno, and Unno will arrive when Professor Bappu was not in Bangalore. So he told me to take care of him. Now I felt so proud. Oh, that's a good thing. Because Vasibero Unno was a doyen of magnetohydrodynamics and radiation and so on, very great solar man. So I had agreed to that. So when Unno arrived, I straight away took him to my office room and started describing my thesis. And Unno was sitting just like that, eyes half closed, and it was to me a Zen-like experience. But I never felt anything awkward. I mean, I just continuously described my thesis work. And then he opened his eyes fully, and then he spoke two words: use radiation. That's what he said. Now, I immediately understood what he meant, because I was working all the time with adiabatic equations, adiabatic condition. So I said, okay, and I immediately started putting in radiation. And because of putting radiation, I found that I could predict a new class of flux tubes, because radiation inhibits the convective collapse of flux tubes. See, earlier Stenflow used to say that flux tubes were either, the magnetic fields on the sun were either kilogauss flux tubes or weak fields. There was no in-between thing. But when I put in radiation, I found that the radiation somehow inhibits the collapse of the flux tube, and there is a size and field dependence because of this. And I was able to publish this in Nature, and it was really, I felt really good, because it was predicting a completely new class of magnetic flux tubes. But I had to wait. The epilogue of this part of the story is I had to wait for 10 years before these new class of flux tubes were discovered observationally by Sami Solanki and company. And that was 10 years after this. That was in 1996. Anyway, so that was a very nice thing. I mean, predicting something from theory and seeing it coming true in observations. Okay. Again, here it was the IIA and Professor Bappu especially, his generosity in allowing people to work wherever they chose, with whomever they wanted. That was the key thing here, which I don't think it is very much prevalent in many places. This was typical in the IIA's very liberal way of thinking. So now let me go to another chapter, that is my switch to instrumentation. Professor Bhattacharya, I had always respected him from afar. I had not direct dealings with him earlier. And he, in fact, he took my interview during my first job for research assistant at Kodaikanal. I was in Raman Institute. And what I liked about him was the first thing, when we were waiting in a sofa outside the room, and he was coming in, and he asked us, "Did you all have lunch?" So that showed a very humanitarian side, which reflected in all his later activities. Of course, we had not had lunch, because In those days, Raman Institute was very isolated. Nothing, no hotels were nearby. So we thought we should not lose the chance of, if you were called for the interview and we are not there, it is bad. So we just sat there without having lunch. But nevertheless, he asked us about it. So that's how uh, I had this affinity to Professor Bhattacharya. And he also used to think, since he had seen me first time at the interview and was probably very impressed, so he used to, every time he gave a talk on solar magnetic fields, his thesis was on that. He used to say, oh, now we need to measure the vector magnetic fields, and he used to look very significantly at me. I used to look away because I didn't want to do instrumentation at that time. But after my PhD thesis, Professor Bhattacharya thought that now he can induce me a little more strongly. So he sent Bala Subramaniam. He was his, I think, JAP student at that time. And Bala told me that Professor Bhattacharya wants him to work on measurements of vector magnetic fields from Kodaikanal, using Kodaikanal tunnel telescope. So I said, okay. And we started doing stuff. Bala not only built the polarimeter and took the spectra, Zeeman spectra. He also inverted them. In those days, there were no standard inversion routines. And he made them himself. And I remember he used to visit Kavalur and work with Tushar Prabhu on some routine. It's a minimization routine or something. And he used the computer heavily in Kavalur. And he made it. I mean, finally was able to invert the spectra into magnetic field parameters. So that happened that time. In meantime, I had gone to Harvard and worked on solar spectral data processing. So that attracted me towards high resolution solar physics. And then it's not only solar physics. I was attracted to interferometry even from college days. So I came back and started work on the 1 meter telescope for doing speckle and Fizeau mask interferometry in Kavalur with Swapan Saha and A.P. Jairaj. So I can just flip to one slide and show you these pictures. They show the sequence of specklograms, as you call them. And here you can see the interferograms also, because here we had put you put a mask with two holes on the top of the 1 meter telescope, and A.P. Jayarajan helped us in that because we are not sure about the telescope, how to handle it. So he helped us. So that was good, and we took these data using a movie camera, 16 mm film, and this idea to use movie camera was given by Professor Rajmohan at that time. So this was a great thing, and we were able to publish this paper. The referee in current science was saying, although this is very preliminary work, done for the first time from Indian soil, I am allowing it to be published in current science. So those were very encouraging words, but Swapan was very keen on building a better, solid, nice, steady camera with all the proper detectors and all that. So he started doing it. And in the meantime, there was a supernova, if you remember, in the LMC. And I learned an important lesson by the supernova. You see, the supernova had burst, and then Swapan was asking, shall we observe the supernova with our spectral camera? And shall I expedite the making of the camera so that we can put it? So I made a very great calculation. I took how much time the supernova will take for the material to expand to the size of the airy disk of the 2-meter Bappu telescope. And then I said, no, this will take a long time. So you go and continue with the proper way of building the camera. We don't have to worry about putting it on the thing supernova right now. But later on, I found out that when I had been in Harvard, they had observed the supernova with a 2-meter class telescope, and they had found some so strange sources within the just beyond the airy disk of their telescope, so they could resolve it. And later on, it turned out that these are called photon echoes, because although the supernova will take, the material will take time to expand, the photons would go the speed of light, and they get reflected from the debris surrounding the supernova, the previous left debris surrounding the star. And these were seen as the bright sources. And these people, they had fun discovering this photon echoes. So I was very ashamed of my the way I used to. I thought I was thinking like a theoretician. The important lesson is one should never assume that we know everything about nature. Everybody knows that. Sometimes they forget it. So we should go out and we should actually try. What is the harm taking a night and observing something may be there. This is the excitement of an observer. I mean, he goes and tries to see things, new things. Well, anyway, this interest in interferometry made me that current science comments went to my head actually, and we proposed a grandiose proposal for optical interferometry, and still remember that in the DST meeting, I was asked, how much money have you spent in this project till now? I said 100 rupees, and everybody was laughing in the audience. Although I didn't realize, I was speaking the truth, because that was the money we spent on the film for the 16 film for the movie camera. So I mean, naturally the people were not impressed, and Kasturi Rangan, he was dictating the responses to various proposals. And when my turn came, I was asked to go into the office. Then he was dictating to, I think, Rajan at that time. He was saying, this is a nice proposal, very interesting, but this needs to be really looked into. So I am proposing a seed money of rupees. Now, that was a big thing. I didn't realize at that time. We had proposed a large amount. I'm ashamed to tell how much I had proposed, very large amount. And he was giving us 25 lakhs. But I think that was very correct. And I should have continued in that. But this was disillusionment. And I said, no, I will go back to my good old son. So that was how I came back to Sun. Again, I had gone to NASA to work with Mona Hagyard at the Marshall Space Flight Center, MSFC. And she had made a vector magnetograph. And this was very interesting because it was made from a stellar telescope. And so it had a this one in front, a filter, big filter, which allowed only 100 angstrom of the light to come in. So there was no heating from the sun. Only 100 angstrom worth of light was coming in. And she could happily use it to measure the vector magnetic field. So this idea I put in my mind when I came back. And then I came back to India with a purpose to continue the interferometry experiment in RRI, but that also never turned out. So we went on to start doing some small vector magnetic field measurements using some funds from a DST project with Bhattacharyya Saab as the PI and Anand and R.S. Narayanan and Jayavel. Jayavel was the mechanic. And when it went along nicely, we could measure it. Not measure it, we could get some profiles. I'll show you the profiles. So this was the intensity profile. This was the iron line 6302 and 01, I think. And this was the V profile coming from subtracting the I plus V and I minus V. So seeing this profile, it gave such a delight because, nowadays everybody takes downloaded data and they're very happy with the results. But making your own instrument, struggling with it, tuning it, getting the result, and then seeing these profiles, and we could publish it even. That was the great thing. That gave such a lot of pleasure, which taking this downloaded data may not be so that person. If you want to do front cutting edge science, then maybe you want to go for this new data. But there are some other kinds of people who want to make some things and get something out and enjoy looking at it. So anyway, so after that, there was a meeting to decide on a new project. This was the meeting where the Himalayan Chandra telescope proposal was accepted in the preliminary stage. So there was a fight going on between solar and stellar, because solar people were thinking that it is our due. It's a long time, since 1960 we had no new equipment and so on. So I went on to the stage and I gave a small talk saying that why do we fight like this? Let us be brothers and let us make one telescope for both stellar and solar, and then we can try adaptive optics and other things. So this will keep us occupied until we get a hang on making these things. So I was ridiculed. People were laughing and laughing. One person especially, I don't want to mention his name, he is no more. So he laughed a lot, and I asked him, how come, why are you laughing? Please tell me, because I don't think I'm saying anything foolish or ridiculous. But he said no, and it is obvious, and he was laughing. So that day I resolved that sometime I would build a telescope which will do both solar and stellar work. In the meantime, I continued experimentation projects with my students, and they could do their thesis work and so on. Now, let me digress a bit to talk about the enigma of the late Dr. R.S. Narayanan. He was a PhD from IIT Delhi, and he was recruited to be the resident scientist at Kodaikanal Observatory, and it was to enhance the academic atmosphere. But he became embroiled in some miscommunication. I felt in those days that it was miscommunication. And recently I saw there is a book by Malcolm Gladwell about talking with strangers. It's a good book. I recommend everybody to read it because it tells how things are misinterpreted when you talk to people of different wavelengths and so on. But in those days, I had this idea that there was some problem of miscommunication. So luckily, Professor Bhattacharyya also had this idea. He realized that. He transferred Narayanan to Bangalore to work for this vector magnetograph project. He did well. He was the co-author in all those papers, and he participated in a observational campaign for Comet Shoemaker-Levy using the CCD camera of the magnetograph. Because in those days, CCD cameras were not very abundantly available, and they had to do this from Kodaikanal, so this was a good choice. I think Vasundhara Raju was the PI of that I don't remember now. Anyway, when he returned using this equipment, he was involved. His taxi was involved in a crash. It hit a tree and it completely big. It was totaled, and he died in this accident. Along with him, Mr. Simon, who was from the IIA workshop, he happened to be there. He was trying to take a uh, ride into Bangalore from Kodaikanal, and he too died in that accident. Now, I am dedicated, I wanted to dedicate this talk to him in favor of, in the memory of Dr. Narayan, because to me it seemed that he was so conscientious of taking the equipment back in one piece and so on. He stayed until the taxi arrived and he took it along with him. And as a result of that, he not as a result of that, but he died while doing that. So this was a very high price to pay for science, I thought. And therefore, I want to dedicate this 50-year talk in his memory. Now, switching to Dome, that was the arrival of Kaushik. And Kaushik set about the task of the 2-meter Hanley telescope very thoroughly. He made 13 committees and handling different facets of this proposal. And it was really amazing. In 2 years, he could set up in a pristine place in Hanley, build a road and set up everything there, the infrastructure, and then the telescope, and so on. So that was done very fast. And he had given me the task of deciding on the dome. And there were many theories about, I will say theories about domes in those days, closed dome, open dome. So I was asked, since he said, you are good in the seeing and all that, you seem to be knowing things. So you tell me about what dome to put. So this was a very great responsibility. So the first thing I did was examine the weather data, and that immediately told me that I cannot go for the open dome because the wind speeds in Hanley, they were somewhat high, and then to make a open telescope would make the, however stiff you make it, of course, the stiffer the telescope, more expensive it is, you know that. But however stiff you make it, it will be definitely buffeted by the wind. So without doing any calculation, without any simulation, I just decided that open dome will not work. So let us go for a closed dome. But we made the building and the dome out of metal, completely made of metal, because then it would hardly leave any thermal, it will be invisible thermally from the environment, and that would help in maintaining good seeing. And I suppose now the Himalayan Chandra telescope does have good seeing. I have not heard from anybody about bad seeing there, but I don't know. People can comment later on. Anyway, due to all this, I had a glimpses of project management, and that was useful later on. Later on, in the sense, from the day when I was laughed at the DST meeting, I was yearning to build a solar telescope, and when that opening came for the position of the head of the observatory, I decided, let me go and try. And then Professor Agarwal, Girish Agarwal, he told me, I had gone to PRL, he said, told me to go to Udaipur, have a look at the site and then decide. I went there and I was looking at the crisp images in H-alpha at noon, where the sun is at its peak and we expect the atmospheric boiling to be the largest. But the images were so crisp. So I decided to go there. So this is the outline of what I want to speak about my work in Udaipur. So we made this MSSC type of solar vector magnetograph at first, then had some ideas for the 50 centimeter telescope, and then I understood about ISRO methodology of reviews, and then site evaluation was done. Then the collapsible dome concept was brought up, building plans, and then UR Rao's Rescue Act in that, and also he helped in the telescope installation also. I'll describe a little bit in detail. As mentioned by Aruna, this solar observatory was 75, and I think it is September 20th. And the advantage was it is a desert area, so large number of clear days. At the same time, there is a lake, and this lake was a result of the farsightedness of the rulers in those days, 500 years ago, to collect rainwater harvesting in a grand scale. So 5 lakes were made, and so Fatehsagar is one of them. And therefore, we had always water in the lake, except when the monsoon failed miserably. And this happened in the year 2005. Lake became completely dry, and the next year the lake was completely full. And we had a chance to compare the seeing those 2 times, and we had concrete evidence that lake does make a great effect. More of this later. Before that, I want to quickly go through some slides of the solar vector magnetograph in Udaipur. And you can see here the filter is there, allows only 100 angstrom of light to go through. And this is a ready-made 8 inches Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. This worked very well. And Sanjay Gosai, he single-handedly made all this out of off-the-shelf components. And some of them, this slide, this was the time when we were thinking of Celostat, but later on we went to the Schmidt-Cassegrain telescope. And then this was, we could map the vector magnetogram of this active region 10756. Now, again here, we did a tweaking. Like this was a small telescope, and the results were not it was not a flaring event or nothing. Results were not very exciting. So we thought we'll combine vector magnetography with helioseismology. And then we could give the power of the oscillation, solar oscillation, as a function of the magnetic field, the inclination, and so on, frequency. So this is a small tweak. And it tells us that no matter what equipment we have, if you think a bit, we can really produce some nice stuff from that. May not be earth-shaking, but it gives satisfaction. And every time I look at these pictures, I feel happy. Maybe I'm an easily contented man, but I felt happy looking at these results. So now let me quickly go through the evolution of the MAST concept. So earlier we thought of building a multi-aperture solar telescope. This was my obsession with interferometry. And then it turned out it's very difficult, and we settled for a meter aperture solar telescope. But then the ISRO review for the project, the first thing Kiran Kumar asked me was, what size? And then when I said 1 meter, he said, why 1 meter? So it turned out that he wanted us to match the adaptive optics capabilities with the site, worst condition of the site, seeing, and then find out the optimum size for that. Sridharan did a lot of work on that and came out eventually with a nice formula. The optimum size D equal to 3 times square root of 3 times R0, the R Fried's parameter, times square root of N, capital N, which is the number of actuators. And we had 36 actuators we thought of for the adaptive optics. So it turned out to be 3 into, the R0 was 3 centimeter, worst case R0, 3 into 3 into 6. So that was 54. So we settled for a 50 centimeter telescope. But now what to do with the name, acronym? So uh, Girish Agarwal wanted the same thing to avoid any other problem. So we changed it to multi-application solar telescope. And here I was happy because since this telescope could be used for both sun and the stars, this was my dream of making such a telescope. And therefore the multi-application is very apt. So far, so good. So now we had the initial plan to use the existing building, but the revised MOS design required a new building. Now, new building was out of question. Finally, we were struggling with the local committees and also Professor UR visited Ashok Gehlot, and then he could get he invoked the rarest of the rare clause, and then we got the permission. Okay, so there he did the very clean thing, like cutting the Gordian knot. Instead of going around, beating around the bush, went to the chief minister, got it done. Now, Amos wanted access to the island for installation, but also wanted a certified vendor to erect the crane. So we were scratching our heads what to do. Again, after long struggle, I went to Professor U.R. Rao, and he said, you separate the problem of certification and construction, and you can do it. So just like what he said, we could do it. We used the Amos insurer for Amos to witness the transportation of the crates across the lake. So transportation was taken care. And then we had experts from SAC Ahmedabad, to certify the gantry crane after rigorous tests. These tests were really rigorous. We had to take a load of several tons. We made a big container of that, poured water into it, and lifted it, and so on. It was very interesting, the whole thing. So here are some quick. This one, many of you would have seen this picture. The transportation was done very simply, very low tech. And we had this platform made for very small sum of money, and put the crates on this platform and just pulled it across to the island there with a rope. Manually, people used to pull it, and then there we raised it using this gantry, and one by one we could install it on the telescope. And then this was a telescope. This was also very strange because it doesn't look like an ordinary telescope, because we had given a very strict specification. Again, my obsession with seeing, that no part of the telescope should vary more than 1 degree from the ambient. And Amos had this simple plan. They had a umbrella, a sunshade, so that the direct sunlight doesn't fall on the metal members. And they managed to, and finally, with a lot of skill, they had to put heaters and coolers together to combat the rise in ambient temperature in Udaipur. It used to rise very fast, and they managed to, make it within 1 degree. And the seeing turned out to be good. And these are some examples. Many of you might have seen some of these pictures. And so we were happy. And then I was having this bee in the bonnet all the time about interferometry. So I thought, let us try the Fizeau mask interferometry. I went to China to try it. It didn't succeed. I will show you one slide. In China, without a mask, with one mask, two slit mask, there was no difference. We ran the autocorrelation on that. Nothing. There was no change. So there was no. We didn't see any fringes, no interference. And then we tried it in MAST, and we got fringes here. So if you can see carefully, fringes are there, and we got some results, and we could even publish it in solar physics. So my this one was slightly satisfied, my desire for interferometry. I hope this thing can continue. We also found out why in China we couldn't see it. Even Gregor could not see see the fringes with the large baseline because the fringes get washed out when the baseline becomes very large. So the all this we could express in this paper, and I was very happy about it. So now to the final slide. I could learn many things from my students. This is not just trying to please them or anything. I have no need for that. So, uh, you see, for example, Bala was a great speaker. No, he could communicate well. Anybody who knows Bala will this one endorse my view. And Prasad, he was finding effective solution based on existing packages. Siraj and I struggled with a big with a program and to run these one dimensional unsteady mode equations. But he found it, of course, several years later. He found it at the back of I think the numerical recipe packages, and he just quietly fitted it and got the result, and he got better results on helmet streamers. Now, Krishna Kumar, he was always uh, steady about, because he knew what he wanted, and whatever his thesis was, he stuck to his thing, and now he's now having a he's running his own company in optics, in high tech optics and all. So he's very happy. Shankar, he was I actually troubled him for because of budget constraints, so he had to do a lot of do it yourself instrumentation and keeping one school, and that has kept him in good stead. And right now he's handling a lot of projects, including support to our VLC in Aditya. Now, Sridharan, he was always rigorous and meticulous. So I was sometimes taking some intuitive jumps, but Sridharan always cautioned me. So that is a good lesson I learned from him, to not jump so quickly, intuitively. And Ravindra, he used to enjoy his research, and he could see what is happening on the sun. Once we had something about the oscillations near the periphery of active regions, and he could. I was thinking of some grand things like what is that, some statistical things and all, but he just looked at it keenly and said, "This is something about moving. Some stuff is moving out from the sun, and these time changes are due to the fact that the stuff passes the pixel, and as it passes, it gives a bump." So that that was fantastic, and so I learned the lesson of not jumping too much to grand things and looking at the what is really happening on the sun. And Brajesh Kumar was good in risk assessment, and he was very good in planning. Sanjay Gosai, of course, he is now called what is called, I think, little Jack Harvey or something in his place. So he is now good in all these instruments. And Sanjeev Tiwari taught me about time management, although I didn't learn much about time management. He was doing his time management. And Rohan Lewis, he used to keep on trying the experiment. And that I could learn, because I was always not impatient. I kept on waiting until the thing happened, and we got the result. So it was good working both in Kodaikanal or IIA with all its liberal atmosphere, where I could say I could blossom, not blossom, but I could grow nicely, and then all these skills I could use in the more rigorous regime in under the ISRO thing of PRL. So both helped me a lot. I enjoyed myself. I'm again thankful that I had this nice opportunity to speak about myself and my association with both the places, Udaipur and Kodaikanal. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Venkatakrishnan, for such a wonderful, beautiful narration of your experience with your, instrumentation and how you built instrumentation instruments and used them, and also your last slide on the lessons learned from your PhD students. That's a very, very impressive. So, may I open it now to the audience for
Yes,
interactions?
of
Yes.
course.
Any questions? Please, you can ask.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that you brought a lot of memories from my student days. And I also wanted to say that one of the first talks I gave as a student was on the charge coupled devices.
Okay.
And I was absolutely kind of surprised when you came and asked some questions specifically on CCDs, because for me, we're on theory working on something like solar, and then you're coming and asking on questions on CCD. I kind of totally opened up my mind, so that okay, you can be interested in wide variety of things, kind of thing. And second
Thank
thing is the interaction we had on initial mass function on star clusters. So that was also like kind of really opened my eyes, saying that you have a really wide variety of interests. Then, yeah, thank you so much.
thank you. These words, yeah.
Are there any more questions or comments?
Yeah, this is Anupama, and I have no question, but I really enjoyed the talk, Venkat, and as Anupuni said, it brought back a lot of memories. The discussions we used to sit and have with Bala, and listening to his rantings, all that. It really brought back a lot of memories. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I would also probably like to make a comment. Thanks, Venkat, for a very nice talk and a lot of memories. Yeah, we missed you because you moved to Udaipur, taking away our good, sports persons also, Krishna Kumar, with you. But I think we enjoyed. And as I think Annapurni mentioned, that initially, since because of your association with Siraj, I always knew you as a MHD person, but then you used to ask all the most difficult, instrumentation questions, and slowly we realized, how versatile you are and the varieties of problems you have tackled. And I think I must compliment also that probably you are one of the prolific student producing person also in solar context. In your generation, I think you have produced the maximum number of PhD students on solar
Arnab,
physics.
you have forgotten Arnab.
Yeah, no, Arnab has produced good students, but number-wise, I think you are more. So these days, quantification also matters. So quality and quantity both are important, of course. So yeah, so thank you for that. Thank you for that, because that's very important. I mean, today we have very bright young people, and I'm sure a lot of credit goes to you. In fact, I just also pointed out some people that Udaipur Solar Observatory has the biggest solar group now in India. So they have overtaken IA. They have overtaken IA. So that credit definitely goes to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, are there any more comments or some questions? So, if not, let us thank again Professor Venkatakrishnan for a very interesting talk. We thoroughly enjoyed. And once again, I would like to thank you on behalf of IA-50 Organizing Committee. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much. And thank you all the participants.